Heroin has expanded rapidly across South Africa, not just in big cities, but also in small towns and rural areas, and it's taking a heavy toll on communities. The spread of heroin has been facilitated by gangs, organized crime, and incompetent or corrupt police in the country. Well, joining us via Skype is Charity Monareng, the parliamentary officer from TB HIV CARE, to talk to us about this. Charity, thanks so much for being with us. Welcome to Morning Live.
Thank you very much for having me, and good morning to you, Leanne.
Talk to us about the research. How was it conducted, and just some of the findings of it.
Okay. So the research was conducted by ENACT, and they were conducted in 3 cities, in Johannesburg, Nelson Mandela Bay, and in Durban. And the findings were that in 2015 there was a research done, and it was found that 75,000 people use heroin. And in the same report, or in the same year, it was estimated that 0.21% of South Africa's population used heroin. Sure. And that was translated into 110,000 people using heroin. Yeah. And it was also predicted that this has increased greatly over the past 4 years.
Are these results surprising? I mean, has there ever been a lot of research done into the heroin use of South Africans?
Okay, so the heroin use in South Africa has gone largely unmonitored, and this has really been because if heroin in South Africa is known as nyaupe, wonga, or sugars. Mm. And because of this, it went very much unmonitored.
Okay. So it almost, as much as we call it by different names, the bottom line is this is heroin use. And I imagine, as shocking as these figures are that have come out, it's possibly bigger than what we're thinking, or what this is showing in the research.
That is correct.
Yeah. I mean, if you had to sort of talk to what you assume it may be, I mean, we're talking about 110,000 people, but I mean, what numbers are we really looking at?
So research hasn't really been done by the state, and a lot of research that has been done by non-governmental bodies. So the problem with this is that the research is not really comprehensive. So we can't really say how many people actually use heroin.
Yeah. Okay, so according to this research, the growth is exponential in South Africa, and over the last 5 years, it really has been getting bigger and bigger. Why? What do we attribute the growth to?
So what we need to understand is that heroin is a high dependency drug. And when there's a high dependency, the demand for it becomes really high. And so this is a winning game for suppliers.
Yeah, I'm sure, because once you get that one hit, you just want to keep on having more and more and more. And I mean, the reality is that it's never pure heroin. There's also a lot of things that are added into it.
That is correct. And that's the problem that we're faced with. And I mean, if we do not understand what heroin is and what it's mixed with, how we can't really fix the problem or monitor it.
Yeah, I mean, we know that heroin has been around for a very, very long time. I mean, it's not something new. But if we have to go back and have a look at where it actually comes from, I mean, how does it land in South Africa? Because I know there were a lot of studies that were done, and there was talk of it arriving at our ports, and it was also a gateway to Europe and, you know, different countries as well. Can you talk to us about that?
Okay. So heroin production happens in Afghanistan, and what was found during this research was that it was easier to transport heroin from Afghanistan to Europe and the USA using the southeastern coast. And the reason for this is because the other routes have become heavily policed, and I mean, it's shorter to transport the heroin from Afghanistan to South Africa, to Europe, and that's why those routes are used.
Yeah. If we talk to Nigeria, talk to us about the involvement of Nigeria in the whole issue of heroin.
Okay. So what I know from my research is that because the heroin passes through the southeastern coast, it gets dropped in, or not necessarily dropped, but it passes through different African countries. And I mean, the same problem happens in South Africa, where we have suppliers and dealers in the different African countries.
Also Tanzania, because I'm reading here in the research that it shows that heroin supply is largely controlled by Tanzanians.
That is correct. The southeastern coast really is really affected by this.
Yeah. Again, we talk to prices because a lot of people think that, or there's a perception that heroin is more expensive than other drugs like TIC. Is it perhaps becoming more popular? Does it mean that, I mean, some of the people are talking to 25 Rand to 30 Rand a bag, and then they need, obviously, not just one a day. I think there's, 3 or 4 shots a day. I mean, talk to us about pricing.
Okay, so the pricing of heroin varies in different cities, and it also depends on how people take it. So it could either be injected or smoked. And I know the perception is that how do drug users afford their use? And the misconception is also that a lot of heroin users are very violent and commit a lot of crimes. However, what was found in this research is that they fund their use through petty jobs. They recycle. So all the people that we always see carrying those bags, some of them are heroin users. And I mean, what's beautiful right now is because they've actually become part of the waste management cycle. So they play quite a role in the informal economy.
And I think at the end of it, I mean, we can sit and talk about all of this and talk about how the drugs are used, where they come from, how many shots a day, how much it costs. But the reality is it is ruining people's lives, and it's becoming more and more frequently used in South Africa. What about South Africa's drug policies? Why can it actually not stop the distribution of these drugs? I mean, if we're seeing studies, we know exactly where they are, where they come from, where they're being distributed. Why is there not been some active policy change in South Africa to try and curb this?
So the problem that we faced in South Africa is because we've adopted a Western approach to drugs, which is essentially abstinence-based. And what this means is that our approach is more punitive, and so drug users are arrested and not treated. And what we hope is that South Africa could adopt a more harm reduction approach to it. So what this means is that they basically treat substance users as opposed to arresting them. Yeah. So there's different harm reduction services that could be offered, and this is what we hope for. So the different harm reduction services that are really there are opiate substitution treatment, as well as NSP, which is needle syringe exchange programs. And in South Africa, we have one state-funded program called COSAB, Community-Oriented Substance Use Program. And this is funded by the city of Tshwane. And TB HIV CARE also offers some of these harm reduction services.
Yeah. What about the role of law enforcement agencies in all of this? Because there is talk that not enough is being done, and that there is involvement and corruption at very high levels to allow this epidemic to continue through South Africa. And it's not, it's not as many people would think, the poorer communities who are susceptible to this. Anybody is susceptible to this.
This is correct. And what was found in this report as well is that what happens with law enforcement, because they're the first point of contact for substance users and dealers, and because these are drug economies and very cash driven. And so, I mean, this infiltrates police departments, especially to policemen that get paid very little. And so what happens is that police use drug dens as ATMs, and patrol cars essentially stop at drug dens and take money for bribes, as well as police reselling drugs from one drug dealer to another.
Absolutely frightening. It really, really is. Charity, thanks so much for talking to us. If people need help, and I know that you have, you've spoken very briefly about that, but if you know somebody who is addicted to heroin, or you want to report it and you know somebody's dealing in this, what do you do? What action can you take? And how can you help people that are addicted?
So, as I mentioned, there are a few state-funded, one state-funded harm reduction service program. And there are a few that TB HIV CARE offers in the Western Cape, in Gauteng, and in the KZN. And what we hope that people would do is not turn their children in or family members to the police, and instead try to seek help for them and treatment for their drug use.
Yeah. All right, we leave it there. Visit the website, I'm on it now, tbhivcare.org. Go onto that website. As you heard, there are officers around the country. They can help you, they can put you in touch with the right people, try to get to the bottom of this. That was Charity Monareng, who is a parliamentary officer from TB HIV CARE, talking to us about research that's been done, which is showing the growth of heroin use in South Africa and how it is destroying families and lives, and the involvement of law enforcement authorities in all of this. Let's take a break. See you after this.